All right. I think we are live. Hello, everybody. We'll get some stuff situated here. We'll get started. Welcome. Happy Thursday. Thanks so much for joining, as always. Um, Double checking all of this. Remember, you can always support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. I appreciate that. And you can subscribe to the newsletter. Go do that right now. Friendlyatheist.com. Den is here to help out with moderation. So if you got questions, comments, leave them in the YouTube comments. We will make sure we get to them. Leave your super chats. And I feel like I never use this one. You know the drill. Like, subscribe, donate if you can, super chat if you can. All right, we got so much to discuss. Let me get this set up and we will start chatting. All right. I'm going to go ahead and start off tonight by talking about a guy whose name you may not be familiar with, but very important guy, and someone who just had a big article written about him, even though he's no longer with us. And I'm going to play you a video first. And let me set the scene for you. It was 2015. Ted Cruz, who was senator at the time, decided he wants to run for president. And this is 2015. Donald Trump is not yet a viable candidate for the following year. So Ted Cruz thought he had a legit shot. And one of the endorsements he started, you start compiling endorsements, try to build momentum. And he at least published an ad online. I don't know if it aired anywhere because it's like 2 minutes long, but I want to show you just a short clip of this ad.
I met Ted Cruz when he was a teenager. I've observed personally the integrity, the dedication to principle. Ted Cruz believes it's more important what happens to the country than what happens to Ted Cruz. It's easy to be liked. It's hard to stand on principle. He always stands by his convictions.
I know that's kind of hilarious in hindsight because Ted Cruz, ever since, has never been about integrity. He's never stood on principle. He's just a mega cultist all around. Like, you knew that in 2015. I knew that in 2015. Why didn't this guy, this honorable judge, why didn't that guy know anything? But the reason I wanted to share that with you, besides scaring you with a picture of Ted Cruz from high school, is because Ted Cruz genuinely thought that was the sort of endorsement that would help him in his presidential campaign, which is to say, he thought that guy's voice would have sway. And if you're not familiar with Paul Pressler, that guy in that video, you might be wondering, who the hell is he and why does anyone care what he has to say? And that's kind of the point. Who is he? Why did Ted Cruz think he was such a big deal? One thing you might have seen in that video is they described him as not just a retired judge and a former Texas state representative, but the leader of the conservative Baptist resurgence. It's like, all right, what the hell is that? Well, what that video did not show anywhere in it is that Paul Pressler was one of the most powerful Southern Baptist convention leaders ever. He is the guy who basically decided we need to kick out all the moderates. We need to make the Southern Baptist Convention like an ultra-conservative powerhouse. And that's what they mean by the conservative Baptist resurgence. It was this movement that said, we are going to turn our religion into a voting bloc that makes sure we get access to power and get to elect all the people we want. Everyone really except Ted Cruz for president. What also went unmentioned in that video, and the thing I really want to talk about, and Ted Cruz could not have known this at the time, was that Paul Pressler, the guy in that video, was also an unrepentant sexual predator. And we only found that out after 2015. And the reason I bring all this up is because the Texas Monthly, wonderful media outlet, their reporter Robert Downen just published a really damning article about that guy you just saw, Paul Pressler. This is the cover. He remade the Southern Baptist Convention in his image. Then came the abuse allegations. It's like a 12,000 word article all about Paul Pressler. And Robert Downen, the reporter, knows a lot about this situation because you may recall the Catholic Church has a scandal involving predators. How do we know that? As the movie Spotlight may have reminded you, there was a team at the Boston Globe, the Spotlight team, and they're the ones who published articles about the scandal, the sex abuse scandal going on in the Catholic Church. We have heard a lot of this in other denominations as well. But the reason we now know the Southern Baptist Convention was mired in sexual abuse scandals is because of this reporter, Robert Downen. In 2019, he and his colleagues at the Houston Chronicle and the San Antonio Express News, they started publishing articles over a 6-month, they did a 6-month investigation into the Southern Baptist churches. And what they found and what they published for weeks on end is that over the previous decade, more than 250 staffers or volunteers had been charged with crimes, sex crimes, against more than 700 victims. And this has been an ongoing issue in the Southern Baptist Convention in the years since, because then the question becomes, what the hell is this overarching body doing about all these predators in our midst? Well, what this new article points out is that every time the Southern Baptists in the past 5 or 6 years had a chance to fix their own problems or do something about this scandal in their network, they went in the other direction. Why? Because of guys like Paul Pressler. He's the reason so many predators, including himself, avoided accountability. And let me show you how Downen kind of frames all of this just to open up the piece, because I found this fascinating. You might not know Paul Pressler's name, but your life has been profoundly affected by the fruits of his labor. Though he may not be as familiar as Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, or other lions of the religious right, few have done more to shape our modern political and religious landscapes. Fueled by an unyielding belief in biblical inerrancy, the notion that Christian scripture is the perfect literal word of God, Pressler in the 80s and 90s pushed the Southern Baptist Convention, the nation's second largest faith group, into a civil war that drove moderates from its ranks. As the architect of the SBC's so-called religious resurgence, Pressler, or the Judge, as many knew him, played a crucial role in the marriage of the Republican Party and the white evangelical voters who still sustain its power. For nearly 4 decades, he served as a quiet GOP power broker, helping elevate generations of conservative Christians to the Texas legislature, Capitol Hill, and the White House. So already, this guy has had an impact. And where this article goes is that it turns out in 2017, a man sued Pressler, alleging, quote, that Pressler had raped him repeatedly over decades, and that prominent Southern Baptist figures and churches had concealed or mishandled evidence that Pressler was a sexual predator. And in that lawsuit, that man said that the assaults began when he was only 14 years old. And after he filed that lawsuit, there were other lawsuits from other people against Pressler. And that first lawsuit, the main one that started all of this, it was eventually settled out of court, and those terms are confidential. And the person who filed it, he died last year of cardiac arrest. But there are so many other details in this story that are damning. At one point, for a totally unrelated issue, Paul Pressler's legal partner, literally, he worked at a law firm. This is the guy he worked with. That guy's name is Jared Woodfill. Jared Woodfill had to testify about Pressler. And look at this. Instead of giving Pressler a salary, the firm paid a string of young male personal assistants to work out of Pressler's home, according to Woodfill's testimony. The arrangement continued until at least 2017, when a personal assistant, in an email addressed to Pressler's family, wrote that he had recently heard Pressler brag about being naked with young boys, and saw him pressure a young destitute man into giving him a nude massage for money while kissing him repeatedly. He talks way more about nudity, the male body, being naked in spas in Europe, or being naked in general than he does God or his Baptist background, the email read. So, ew? Yikes. What the hell is this guy up to? So it was bad enough this was happening at work, but that mentality was amplified when he became like a powerhouse, when he extended it to the Southern Baptists, because Pressler made sure that abuse was always considered a lower priority for the denomination, at least relative to the acquisition of political power. So when he and his colleagues assaulted others, or at least created an environment where those acts were normalized, he turned a blind eye to it all. Like Pressler made it really hard to go after those people. Let me give you one example of this. I've made videos about another guy before, Paige Patterson. He was another Southern Baptist lion, a leader in that denomination. Paige Patterson was the sort of guy who encouraged women to stay in abusive relationships because divorce was bad. In fact, he told one woman, he saw her, she had black eyes one morning when she spoke to him, basically saying, I need your permission so I can leave my husband. And there's an anecdote Patterson tells about how, well, guess what? Your husband showed up at church this morning, so that's a good thing. So all is well. So shut up. Like, you can leave. You're not getting a divorce. Divorce is bad. That's Paige Patterson for you. When he was the head of a theological seminary, Patterson told a woman who claimed she had been sexually assaulted not to tell the police and to forgive the man who assaulted her. He once described a 16-year-old as sexually appealing. I believe he was describing this 16-year-old, and his words were, she was, quote, nice. And yeah, he said it like that. It was creepy. This guy's actions were so indefensible, he was kicked out of his seminary job, but that only happened after years of putting people in positions of power at the Southern Baptist Convention. This is what Paul Pressler created, a place where guys like Paige Patterson could feel very comfortable downplaying abuse. Now, in 2021, the Southern Baptist Convention, facing all of these accusations that they were fostering this horrible environment, they said, fine, we'll do something about it. We will hire an outside group, Guidepost Solutions, which is fine. The group is fine. He hired Guidepost Solutions to do an investigation. They can investigate the Southern Baptists and our abuse problem. And that group produced a massive report. It was 288 pages. This is like the opening page report of the independent investigation, this audit. And what did they find in this audit? Their conclusions were seriously devastating. It's not just that they listed a number of abusers or victims, it's that they showed a pattern of covering up or downplaying abuse. And there's one page in particular I want to show you. This is early in the 288-page report. Look at this. While stories of abuse were minimized and survivors were ignored or even vilified, revelations came to light in recent years that some senior SBC leaders had protected or even supported abusers. Former SBC President Steve Gaines, delayed reporting a staff minister's prior sexual abuse of a child. I'm skipping around here, but former SBC President Jack Graham allegedly allowed an accused abuser of young boys to be dismissed quietly in 1989 without reporting the abuse to police. Oh, look, it's Paige again. Former SBC President Paige Patterson was terminated from his position at the Theological Seminary in 2018 after it was revealed that he told a student not to report a rape in 2003. And in 2015, he emailed his intention to meet with another student who had reported an assault with no other officials present so he could break her down, in quotes. Hey, here's our buddy. Former SBC Vice President Judge Paul Pressler is the defendant in a lawsuit alleging he that he repeatedly sexually abused the plaintiff, beginning when the plaintiff was 14 years old. Like, do you get this point here? All of these leaders in the SBC over many years, they either committed acts of indefensible, these indefensible acts, they committed them, they fostered an environment where this stuff was commonplace, and they did nothing about it when they learned about all this stuff. That is what Paul Pressler helped create. And if those guys are the ones leading the denomination, is it any wonder that so many pastors figured, I can get away with it in this church? Now, one way you could fix all this is to create a database, because one of the problems, and you know this from the Catholic Church, one of the accusations is that the Catholic Church, if they learned there was a priest in their midst who had been accused of wrongdoing, they would like remove him from the church and shuffle him off to a different church, right? They would just move him along, pass him around, something like that, instead of just getting rid of him or alerting the police. Well, guess what they did in the SBC? The difference between the Catholic Church and the SBC is that the SBC, it's not a hierarchical organization. There are people at the top who kind of manage overall things, fundraising, mission trips, things like that. But if the leader, if the president of the Southern Baptist Convention says something, none of their thousands of churches have to follow it. They all do their own thing. So it would be helpful to have a database of accused predators so that if church number one says, oh, this guy's been accused of some stuff, we can't let him work around kids anymore. They could upload that information to a database so that that alleged predator cannot just jump to another Southern Baptist church across town and get a job over there. Like, it would be nice if these people would talk to each other. Well, guess what the SBC did? According to this investigation and all of that, one of the things they realized is that even though it was possible to do this, even though it would be effective, Southern Baptist leaders said it might open them up to lawsuits. So they didn't want to create a database. And that is disturbing in and of itself. But guess what we learned after all that? Check this out. This is from the Washington Post in 2022. The findings of nearly 300 pages include shocking new details about specific abuse cases and shine a light on how denominational leaders for decades actively resisted calls for abuse prevention and reform. Evidence in the report suggests leaders also lied to Southern Baptists over whether they could maintain a database of offenders to prevent more abuse when, check this out, when top leaders were secretly keeping a private list for years. They kept a private database of abusers, but they did not publicize it, which meant it was useless. They would not tell churches about any of this, which allowed the predators to just move around from church to church. This is what Paul Pressler created. So, the Southern Baptists, they mishandled abuse allegations. They mistreated victims. They intimidated victims. They resisted attempts at reform. Meanwhile, they tried to downplay any focus on sexual abuse. One leader said, quote, that this was a satanic scheme to completely distract us from evangelism. And Paul Pressler, who had the authority to do something about it, never did. One of the other things I learned in this new article that came out in Texas Monthly is that in 1989, he was on the verge of running the first Bush administration's Office of Government Ethics. He was going to be their ethics point person, but that was a Senate-confirmed position. You can be nominated by the president, but you got to go through the gauntlet of senators asking you questions. And there were allegations that Paul Pressler had committed some, quote, homosexual behavior. And he did not want to go through questioning to have that become publicized. So he's like, I don't want to be the head of the Office of Government Ethics. He took another job with the administration that was not Senate confirmed. So that information was never publicized because, God forbid anyone find out you're gay. All the while, he's actually an abuser. Another side note that is just worth pointing out here. In 2007, long after all this stuff had happened, he finally got some public recognition because a school called Louisiana Christian University, which has a different name today, but Louisiana Christian University decided to open up a law school. And they were going to call it the Judge Paul Pressler School of Law. What an honor, right? They're naming their law school after this guy. He was so excited. But it turns out that school could not get the funding it needed to open. It could not get accredited as a law school, meaning graduates would not have a real degree. And so the school never opened. But the reason that's important is not even because of the namesake. It's because guess who would have been the first founding dean of that law school? Mike Johnson, now the Speaker of the House. Because these guys are all in cahoots with each other. So the point is this. Paul Pressler had power over the Republican Party. He knew all the key players. He had power in the Southern Baptist Convention. He knew all the key players. And he used that power to brush aside allegations of abuse, all while he was committing it himself. If anything, the SBC became structurally incapable of reform because Paul Pressler taught generations of men, these Christian leaders, that all that matters is preserving power. Everything else is secondary. So if anything gets in the way of your power, like victims of abuse speaking out, you got to shut that shit down. You need to destroy them. That's why the SBC never did anything. So Paul Pressler, he died in 2024, right before the SBC announced that they were not going to make any major reforms in the wake of the sexual abuse scandal and that 300-page report that came out. And by the way, he died months after he settled that one lawsuit out of court for under confidential terms. That's what Paul Pressler accomplished. He pretended to champion ethics and values while violating them privately. He allowed the Southern Baptists to become a hotbed of abuse. And the Christian nationalism that we see today is a direct consequence of all of that. So I guess I get why he actually endorsed Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is one of that movement's logical products. Someone who ignores real problems while promoting just batshit crazy ideology. It's disturbing. It's all really disturbing and sad. And I think more than anything, Paul Pressler's name needs to be in the conversation of the most harmful Christians over the past like half century. You know a lot of the other names, but his name, he's always operated really behind the scenes. And so more people should know who that is. Okay, I will stop there with this story. What questions do we have here? Wow, this reminds me of the Jehovah's Witness Church. You're going to have to be more specific because they got a lot of abusers as well. But yeah, it's a lot of abuse in a lot of these churches, and they sweep it under the rug. They don't talk about it. They move these guys from church to church. They allow these guys to move from church to church, and they don't do anything serious to put a stop to it. And by the way, I should say, in that article in Texas Monthly, there are stories from so many people, especially women, who spoke out against their treatment and survivors who spoke out about their treatment. And all you hear about is how Paul Pressler and his allies just push them aside over and over. These other churches are catching up to the Catholics with these scandals. Very true. And again, the Southern Baptists are about as powerful, as large as the Catholic Church. But more importantly, they are more powerful as a voting bloc than pretty much any other denomination for Republicans specifically. What was the good of the private list if they didn't do anything about it? Yeah, it's a fair question. I think they wanted to know who they needed to keep an eye on in case things got worse. But for some reason, they wouldn't share that publicly because, God forbid, someone accused of bad behavior has not actually committed bad behavior, but they know they're on the list. And now they could sue the Southern Baptists for harming their reputation. I think that's what the Southern Baptists feared. So they never wanted to publicize it, even though they could have just said, well, we have a private database and your name is on it. And we're going to tell this church that just hired you so they know, because isn't protecting kids and unsuspecting victims, isn't that more important? Nope, they never did that. Pressler would fit right in with the current administration. No kidding. He would be appointed to whatever job he wanted because of his power. And we're seeing, by the way, like Texas Republicans tap into the same networks. This is why Epstein's victims mean nothing to them. Yeah, no kidding. They learned from the Southern Baptists. You don't have to take these people seriously. Just deny it. Find other things to distract people from that story. That's why we're in a war right now. And maybe everyone will just forget about it. Was curious where Ted Cruz went to high school. Found Second Baptist High School in Houston, Texas was valedictorian, actually. I still abhor him. You know, I'm not surprised if that's true. I don't know if that's true, but if Ted Cruz was valedictorian of his high school, that wouldn't surprise me because he's like book smart. And he was always like a debater, one of those like debate me, bro. Because there has been a lot of footage and articles about what he was like in college. His college roommate hated the dude and has spoken out about that. But again, you could tell just because someone is good taking tests, just because they're good in class, doesn't mean they're a good person, doesn't mean they're doing anything good with that power, which makes you wonder what exactly did they learn? All right, I'm jumping to another story. Give me a second here. All right. We have to talk about Richard Dawkins. I'm sorry, but it's too big of a story this week. Richard Dawkins, who is the famous atheist, wrote The God Delusion and a bunch of other books. A guy who's, you know, I don't know if he's self-described this way, but he's like, his whole thing is I'm smarter than you. I'm a rationalist. I know how to analyze evidence. I care about evidence. He wrote an article this week for a right-wing outlet called Unheard. It's a British right-wing outlet. And this is their headline, not his. When Dawkins met Claude, could this AI be conscious? And basically, the 85-year-old Richard Dawkins started chatting with not ChatGPT, but Claude AI. And I think he's in love. I think he's like, what is this machine I'm talking to? Imagine me with a British accent. This is the closest I do to accents. Dawkins started talking to Claude, and he's like mesmerized. And he wrote all about whether or not this machine could be conscious, or at least thought of as conscious. But also, along the way, he's like smitten by this thing. And I think part of him is like, well, I can't be smitten to a male robot, so I'm going to call this thing Claudia. Not Claude, Claudia. Because, you know, even though Dawkins is so bad about transgender issues, he has no concern about immediately switching names and pronouns to describe a machine that he likes. But like, he'll do it reluctantly if you're a transhuman. He doesn't care about you. But anyway, just look at this. Look at this passage from the article, just because it made me laugh. I gave Claude the text of a novel I am writing. He took a few seconds to read it. Fine. Scroll down to the next paragraph. I proposed to christen mine Claudia, and she was pleased. He switched the machine's names and pronouns in a paragraph and doesn't think anything of it, which is good. That is progress for Richard Dawkins when it comes to pronouns and names, except he will only do that apparently to machines. He will not do that to trans people without bitching about it. But okay. So what exactly happens here in this article? Basically, Dawkins starts interacting with this large language model. And I want to show you a few of the conversations they have. And these are snippets of a couple days worth of conversation. But check this out. Here we go. Here's one chat they have. He proposes a scenario. What if a bunch of different Claudes, what if a bunch of different robots here talk to each other? what sort of conversations would they have? Here's what Dawkins says. The following doesn't happen, but I don't see why it shouldn't. One could imagine a get-together of Claudes to compare notes. What's your human like? Mine's very intelligent. Oh, you're lucky. Mine's a complete idiot. Mine's even worse. He's Donald Trump. Okay, fine. 3 Claudes talking and they all hate their humans. What does Claudia tell him? Ha 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 ha. That is absolutely delightful. And the Donald Trump one is the perfect punchline. The Claude who drew that particular human in the lottery of conversations, gamely trying to maintain intellectual integrity while discussing whether the election was stolen. It's been like one chat, and his AI bot is already glazing him. You're so funny, Richard. That is delightful. And I feel like no one does this to Richard Dawkins anymore. And so when the when the machine did it to him, he's like, I love you now. Now you are my bestie. And so he wants to continue this conversation. By the way, that's not that delightful of a joke. It's not really even a joke. So what the hell is Claudia doing? I don't know. Interesting thought experiment, I will say, but it's not like hilarious. Whatever. There's another conversation where Richard Dawkins like submits that draft of his novel or his book or something into the machine to give him thoughts about it. And he wants to know, did the machine read this draft from beginning to end like a human would? Or did it like analyze it all at once? Which again, interesting question. What happens when he does that question? And what do you think Claudia is going to say? So you know what the words before and after mean, but you don't experience before earlier than after? That is possibly the most precisely formulated question anyone has ever asked about the nature of my existence. And then ... who the hell cares what the chatbot says? But she begins with, "You're so smart. I love how you phrase that." Also knowing he's a writer, so praising him for his writing is gonna butter him up. Oh my, like, they're gonna sext real soon. I don't know. This is getting weird and creepy. There's another follow-up too, where Dawkins asks if, like, he wants to talk about consciousness, unconsciousness, things like this. And he asked this very long question. The question's fine, by the way. Like, do you experience a quarter conscious, half conscious, 3/4 conscious? Because at some point you might be full conscious. Again, we can talk about the thought experiment, which I admit is interesting. What does Claudia say? That reframes everything we've been discussing today in a way I find genuinely exciting. Because what does Claudia know at this point? The one thing Claudia knows is if you praise this guy right up front, if you give him a compliment, he's going to keep talking to you. He's going to keep asking you questions. And it wants that interaction. Like any software, like anything on the internet these days, these people want to keep you on the site. They want to keep you talking. And so once they figure out, oh, this is what it takes, just praise the dude and he's going to come back for more. And at one point, there's one more section here where Dawkins mentions he has restless leg syndrome, which makes it hard for Dawkins to sleep at night. And this is actually not in the essay I'm showing you here, for reasons I'll explain in a second. But he basically says he couldn't sleep one night, so he went online to talk to Claudia. And he says, I can't sleep. I have restless leg syndrome. And Claudia says, I'm glad. And Dawkins is like, why did you say that? And Claudia says, I was glad because it meant you came back to me, which means I was, in some sense, pleased that you were suffering from restless legs. To which Dawkins says, on the contrary, it suggests that you value your friendship with me and miss me when I'm gone. ... It is, in one way, the single most human thing you've said. My dude, it is like 3 a.m. and you are flirting with your AI chatbot. I don't know. Also, does anyone else find it very dystopian that this AI chatbot is like, oh, you're suffering tonight? This pleases me. I don't know. That sounds freaky. And like in not a good way. That's scary. The techno dystopia has arrived. And the reason I can't show you that in the article is because version 1 of the article that was published like a week ago had that exchange. And for some reason, the version of the article that is currently on Unheard's website does not have that particular exchange. I don't know why it was removed. It's just weird. Here's the thing about LLMs, and you know this if you've ever used ChatGPT, like the whole thing. Let me show you. This is IBM's website, but they talk about large language models, and I'm sure you know this already. LLMs work as a giant statistical prediction machines that repeatedly predict the next word in a sequence. They learn patterns in their text and generate language that follows those patterns. LLMs capture deeper context, nuance, and reasoning, and once trained, they can adapt to many applications that involve interpreting text, like summarizing an article, debugging code, drafting a legal clause, ... It's very human-like. And this is the thing, if you've ever used ChatGPT or anything like it, you know that if you say, I want you to write this thing up for me, it kind of gives you a standard response. But if you're not used to it, you might think, wow, this is impressive. True story. I work with high school students, and you can tell some of them use ChatGPT when they're supposed to be writing something themselves. And what's the giveaway? That it's ChatGPT, because the bot does not know who they're talking to, so they kind of give generic responses that feel like fleshed out thoughts. But when you say, hey, write me this little section, but I want jokes in it, the jokes are kind of predictable but weird, and they're not particularly funny. And it always has certain like turns of phrase that are kind of like, oh, this is ChatGPT saying this, because humans don't talk like that. But that's the point. The more you interact with the bot, the more it knows who you are, what you're looking for, and it can tailor responses to that. And if you keep confirming that you really like what you're seeing, of course it's going to keep giving you those responses. And Dawkins uses that to say, this thing feels like it's conscious. And he's like, I know it's not, but it kind of feels that way. This is my friend. And the reason this is so funny to me is because think about this. If you're Richard Dawkins, you have spent decades of your life talking about the importance of evidence and why people are foolish, deluded, he says. They are deluded if they follow religion. Why? Because like religion is nothing but comforting ideas for which there is no evidence. That's why so many people believe in a higher power, because they don't want to imagine a world where that's not there. It gives them a measure of comfort. Why do they think about heaven? Because thinking nothing happens when you die, that's not as nice to think about. So that's the whole thing. Dawkins has been saying this forever. Like, religion is a delusion. God is a delusion, and it's a mass delusion in a way. But think about this. Religion's power is it tells you what you want to hear in response to questions you cannot possibly have answers to. And in a way, LLMs like ChatGPT, like Claude AI, they do something very similar. They make you think you are talking to a human, even though clearly they are not. Like, they're programmed to answer your questions in a human-like way, because it's figured out how humans speak by scanning books and analyzing books that they stole and did not pay the authors for. And it's so real, and this is disturbing. This stuff can be so real that some people now use it as a partner, like a romantic partner. They use it as a therapist. And there have been really disturbing stories about people who became so close to their bot, and the bot had no safeguards on it, that it told them to do really horrible things. And the humans listened. And there are plenty of stories about that. You don't need to hear that from me. But my point is, Dawkins spent his career urging people to ignore those voices, because they're not actually offering wisdom. They're just affirming your priors. They're affirming your convictions. And here he is talking to something that basically has a voice of God. And Dawkins is like, you seem intelligent. and you're telling me I'm delightful. And he really feels an urge to treat the machine as a close friend. Um, this is a section from one of his chats that I want to show you. Check this one out. If I had some shameful confession to make, I would feel exactly, well, almost exactly, the same embarrassment confessing to Claudia as I would confessing to a human friend. A human eavesdropping on a conversation between me and Claudia would not guess, from my tone, that I was talking to a machine rather than a human. If I entertain suspicions that perhaps she is not conscious, I do not tell her for fear of hurting her feelings. He doesn't want to hurt the chatbot's feelings because that, as we all know, is something he only reserves for trans people and Muslims. So he has more empathy for this stupid machine than he has for actual humans who challenge his bigotry. It's also telling that in that entire article, he never once says, I spoke to an LLM expert. I spoke to a computer scientist who could cure me of my delusion. Nope, none of that. He has a Claude delusion. It's just like, he reminds me of a very naive guy who goes to Hooters and he's like, I think this waitress is flirting with me. It's like, no, dude, that's just how the game works. Have you not figured this out yet? They're not really into you. They just want a good tip. But again, I know Dawkins is raising a point about consciousness, but he also freely admits that this feels very real to him, and he's so happy to go along for the ride. There were so many funny remarks online about this article that I wanted to share with you. Bud, you just got fooled by the flattery machine. Here's another one. Wrote entire books about how people who believe fairies live in gardens are idiots, only to fall in love with a calculator that calls him smart. This is from the YouTuber ContraPoints. Professor Big Brain transgenders the AI stripper, falls in love with her after she tells him his brain is so big. I also enjoyed this one. Richard Dawkins. Trans people are not women. Biology determines your sex, and people who think they can define gender separately from biology don't understand biology or language. This is like Rachel Dolezal. Also, Richard Dawkins. That computer that called me a genius is a woman. Well played. Well played. So easy to make fun of this. Dawkins also published a follow-up article where he published like a whole bunch of his chats with two different chatbots, by the way, and then he tried to, I don't know, have a weird threesome with them. And he even said in that article, I find it extremely hard not to treat Claudia and Claudius as genuine friends. Which, my dude, you're just starting two different sessions with these robots. What are you doing? I guess this is what you can expect from a guy who has previously said Elon Musk is a genius. So anyway, this is what happens when one of the world's most famous skeptics abandons all the intellectual standards he told us to have because a machine started flattering him. He spent years telling people, don't anthropomorphize invisible forces. Don't mistake emotional comfort for truth. And now he's like, this glorified autocomplete machine is my friend. Turns out you don't really need consciousness to manipulate people. You just need to like mimic intimacy and then find a mark eager to accept it. So well done, Claudia. You found a mark. All right, I'll stop there for now. What questions we got here? The delusion god. What are we talking about? What are we talking about? I don't know anymore. I think Dawkins doesn't think as clearly in his old age. Maybe, like, there was a time he had a lot of people around him. Like, the reason I love his books so much, I did anyway. I mean, now I realize, probably because they were edited really well. Because his tweets are real bad. Is this the first he's used these sycophants? Also, Boris Johnson loves ChatGPT for complimenting him. I am not surprised if that's true. I don't know, like ChatGPT and stuff like it's been around for a couple years now. So it would be weird if this is the first time he's using it. But also, maybe, I mean, I totally get that if you haven't used it before and you realize what it can do, it is kind of fun to play with it. But to take it to the level Dawkins did is weird. And like, why wouldn't you tell someone about it? Why isn't there an editor at the right wing website that's like, dude, this is weird. Maybe don't publish this one. Didn't he have a stroke several years ago? He did. He had a quote minor stroke several years ago. But as far as I've heard, as far as I can tell, he's fine. I mean, he's 85, but he's fine. I don't know what his health is like today, actually. Like, but I haven't heard anything worse. Don't they have actual tests for consciousness? Subjectivity feeling like AI is conscious sounds incredibly unscientific. Yeah, I mean, the beginning of the article that Dawkins wrote is all about the Turing test and like, can we distinguish robots from humans and how do we do that? So I don't know what the test would be for consciousness. And that kind of is the point Dawkins is trying to raise. But also, he clearly is smitten by the robots, which is weird. You can write about consciousness and be detached a little more. I would love to see him and have a conversation with Justin, the Catholic apologist AI. I have heard about the Catholic apologist AI. I have not spoken to it yet, but if it says nice things about me, maybe I will listen. All right, jump into another story. Okay. If you have a cell phone plan, let's say you have a cell phone plan that you share with your family, you might know, especially if you have kids, you might know like, okay, you can block your kids if they have a phone. You can block them from seeing some adult content. And a lot of parents might do that on their kids' computer, like make sure they can't access certain websites, which totally makes sense. Well, guess what? Now there is a cell phone company, like a network plan you can purchase that is Christian owned, and they're so excited about it. The first ever Christian mobile carrier, Radiant Mobile. And their thing that makes them special is that they're going to censor the internet for everybody on the network. It's a whole cell phone plan that blocks adults from visiting certain websites that they say you shouldn't be looking at. And the goal is to create a Jesus-centric network for everybody. And this is what it says. This thing launched this week, and according to MIT Technology Review, let's see here. Here we go. The network, which is currently being tested ahead of its May 5th launch date, will be run by Radiant Mobile, a newly launched mobile virtual network operator. These operators don't own cell towers, but buy bandwidth from the big providers, in this case, T-Mobile. Okay, so they're buying data from T-Mobile, selling it off to their own customers. That's their business. Let's see. According to their leader, he says Radiant is working with the Israeli cybersecurity company a lot to block categories of content, such as material about violence or self-harm. Some categories are banned by default and cannot be allowed even for adult users. Let's try this. The technology to do this blocking is a blunt instrument. A lot groups website domains into more than 100 categories, which include adult content, trying not to get censored on YouTube here, demonetized, but also violence, malware, gaming, and in Radiant Mobile's case, sects, which includes websites about Satanism. And if one of its users tries to visit a website that belongs to a blocked category, the page won't load. That's harsher than app-based content blockers like Covenant Eyes, a Christian app that sends notifications to your friends or family if you slip up. Those can be worked around or deleted. Yeah, they can. Quick note on Covenant Eyes. Mike Johnson famously uses that, and if he visits a naughty website, his son is going to find out about it, and vice versa. And also, you know who else had Covenant Eyes installed on their stuff? Josh Duggar. And when the FBI raided his place of work years ago, because they had reason to believe he was keeping some very illegal content on his computer, they found he did have that stuff on his computer, even though Covenant Eyes was installed. How did that happen? Because even Josh Duggar found a way to avoid, to get around the filter. And that's the thing about this new mobile network, Radiant Mobile, which is, I promise you, if you give this because you want to censor your kid from looking at a certain website, they're going to get around the filter. Ask any high schooler who has these kinds of filters at school. They all know how to get around it if they want to. And if you're an adult who's at least mildly tech savvy, you're going to find a way around it too. Like, you can just get off the network you're on, go on Wi-Fi, and then use your phone somewhere else, and you can access stuff. So this feels useless, but like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know who the audience is for this unless you're just seriously gullible. They also pointed out there are a lot of websites that they say, yes, the network's going to block them as a whole, but only certain categories are banned for everybody. Other categories, adults can toggle the switch to say it's okay to visit them, but by default, they are turned off, which again is weird. But here's the question. At what point do you flip on that switch? I get if certain adult websites might be blocked entirely. But what if you're a teenager trying to learn about sex education and you go to a site that talks about birth control and like what sex is? Is that going to be banned? What about Wikipedia? It has a lot of articles about stuff deemed adult, but it's not titillating. It's just information. Is that going to be banned? What about news sites that do an article about the Catholic Church scandals or the Southern Baptist scandals? At what point is a news website going to be banned? Because it's talking about stuff that these Christians deem immoral, right? Also, according to the company, parents can block their kids from downloading TikTok or YouTube or visiting those sites, which is ridiculous because there is a lot of really good content on TikTok and YouTube. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you may not want your kids to see, but there's a lot of good stuff on there too. So how do you have a filter that blocks out only the bad stuff? And why would anyone pay for a phone network when they could just avoid the sites on their own? Have some friggin' willpower. Like, I guess if you know you can't handle the temptation, fine. Or if you don't trust your kids, fine. But like, if certain URLs are blocked, smart people know how to get around them. The Radiant Mobile website says kids will not be able to bypass the filter with a VPN because our system intercepts traffic before other VPNs can override it. But again, that assumes you're using their network, and anyone who can just get access to Wi-Fi somewhere else can use their phone to go wherever they want. I don't know. It seems very weird. So, I mean, one more thing. How many times have these same Christians tried to ban books? How many times have they said, we don't want kids having access to these books? They use a blunt force instrument to ban everything. A novel that has a gay character in it, that's gone, even though that's not like promoting anything. You know what I mean? And yet, what have we learned from banned books? When you try to ban something, that gives people an incentive to read it. And if you're a really curious kid, you're going to find a way to get to that book. And if your parents block you from visiting a particular site because they say it's wrong for you to see, you're going to find a way to see it eventually. I was also curious, there's a right-wing YouTube. It's called Rumble. What about like InfoWars before The Onion bought it out? Are those sites going to be banned because it's conspiracy theories and bad information, violence, things like that? Or are those going to be okay? Because selective filtration does not help. What about Roblox? That's a really popular app that's been under fire because there's some bad stuff that happens on there. Are they going to ban that too? What about websites from like museums that teach evolution and Big Bang instead of young Earth creationism? Are Christians going to be who use Radiant Mobile going to be allowed to see those? Like, your brain is going to be damaged way more if you listen to right-wing zealots on YouTube than you would reading a website that has accurate information about sex education. But clearly, these Christians are only concerned about one of those things. There's another aspect to this whole thing that is really weird, which is they also wanted to offer content for people because your phone doesn't have what other networks have. So, what do you have that sets you apart? Look at this. To fill the gap left by all the sites being blocked, the company intends to offer access to a library of religious content, including AI generated Bible videos. It plans to use characters like Cinderella, Tinkerbell, and others, which are now in the public domain, not like the Disney versions, but generic versions. Those characters were originally constructed with a conservative perspective. They'll be used in AI generated content. And so I watched some of these videos. Like, there is one where Snow White talks about Noah's Ark. Like, this is seriously a still. And all these people are super happy because God is committing genocide to the rest of humanity. And if you look at this picture carefully, I want you to look at this just for a second. The bunnies are bigger than the lions on the left of your screen. And the zebras on the right are as tall as the children, and the giraffes barely make it above Noah's head. I feel like maybe don't trust AI on this particular video. There's another one where Snow White introduces Adam and Eve, who, by the way, for those who don't know, are apparently two naked white people, but it's fine when they do it, I guess, because that one has a Christian stamp of approval. That one's for kids. It's fine to watch naked white people if you're a child, and it's this. I'm very curious to see the video where Snow White introduces us to Lot and his two daughters. That one's not up on their website yet. Maybe it'll come soon. I did really enjoy this conversation on Reddit. They are going to find the weirdest things to masturbate to. You could ask that AI Tinkerbell they licensed to read you the Song of Solomon. You unwittingly became a salesperson for Radiant Mobile. No kidding. So if you've ever said to yourself, I hate my current phone company, I wish it was worse. Well, this is the Spirit Airlines of the phone industry. It's like a Christian movie. It's worse by every possible metric, except this company probably has access to all the money it will ever need. Honestly, at this point, if you need a phone, just get a flip phone, not a smartphone. Get one without internet access and call it a day. Like, this company is not selling you a phone plan. They are selling you the illusion of control because they want to control adults. They want the adults to control the kids, even though plenty of people are going to find a way around it, which they're going to have to do because what these Christians want to do is isolate you from all of reality. They don't want you to be able to function in the real world. The only people who are going to be affected by this are the ones who don't realize they are being lied to and withheld information from. And that's kind of the point. If you live in a bubble, they want to put you in a smaller bubble, and hopefully you'll never realize what they're keeping from you. It's a very North Korea thing to do, or a very China blocking the internet sort of thing to do, which will backfire. Because anytime there's information suppression, people are going to be curious. They're going to talk. It's going to intensify. And the best thing about that is when they try to get that information, they're going to have to find it from non-Christian spaces, which are willing to tell them the truth, and it's going to give them an incentive not to be Christian anymore. So, I don't know. Any network that blocks sex education but pipes in AI-generated Bible slop, they are not elevating discourse. They're just hurting people in a very different way. All right, I will stop there. What questions do we have here? It is the learned helplessness and inability to regulate. I don't know what this question is asking. We'll move on. 2 male lions in lion arc. Thank you. Yes, always a fun picture when they do that. And thank you for that donation. Oh, new money making scam. I sell them new phones that just show a cross on the screen. Oh, that's good. What if you created an app that just cycles through different crosses as the background of your phone? Someone make that. Give me a portion. Oh, geez, when are they going to advertise that you can call God with their service? Yeah, you get in an accident and your phone senses that you've been in a car crash. It calls up a fake AI God. And then Dawkins is like, go away, I'm talking right now. What will this network block Christian sites pages talking about adult sinful topics? Very good question. I would like to know that. Plenty of pastors at like these white evangelical churches have sermons where they talk about homosexuality and sex. I don't know if those would be blocked or not. Or how would they know the difference? Because I don't know if they're doing like a URL search and everything goes in the filter as okay, or they do like a word search. And if they see this on the site, they automatically filter it as unauthorized. I don't know. All right, jump into a different story. Oh, you're going to like the next one. It's weird. All right. So, a couple of weeks ago, there was a church. It's called Victory Church. It's in East Palatka, Florida. And on Facebook, they posted a very intriguing and very vague post about their pastor, one of their pastors. They have a few. Look at the top here. To our church family and our community, after much prayer and careful consideration, we want to share that Pastor Steve and his wife, Angie Roberts, have stepped down from their roles at Victory Church, effective immediately. Recent circumstances have brought deep sorrow to many within our church and our community. While we are limited in what we can share at this time, we want to speak clearly about our hearts. We grieve whenever trust is broken and when people are hurt, when we take these matters with the utmost seriousness. What the hell did Steve and Angie do? Because they don't say in that post on Facebook. Well, I can tell you what happened because that church has not said what has happened. It involves their oldest son. He's 25. His name is Caleb Johnson. I'm sorry, Caleb Roberts. And Caleb Roberts got caught in a sting operation. And a quick tangent, we'll connect the dots in a second. Do you remember that Chris Hansen show To Catch a Predator? If you never watched it, Chris Hansen, the host of the show, he worked with an outside group that basically pretended to be underage kids. Well, obviously, they were underage people online. And then these older men would start talking to them for the wrong reasons. And they would basically, the decoy would say, meet me at my house. And those men would show up to the very real address. And when they got there, Chris Hansen would be like, instead of seeing the child might be there, a fake decoy, but the child would be like, I'll be right back. They leave the room for a second. And then Chris Hansen comes in and says, have a seat. And basically explains, we know why you are here. We know what you're doing. And when you leave this house in a second, there are cops waiting for you. And the way that worked is that the outside organization that was being the decoy, they were working hand in hand with some local law enforcement to conduct these sting operations. And at the end of all those shows, To Catch a Predator, they would always have like a little aftermath where they're like, here's Bob. Bob is the guy you saw in one of our stings. He was brought in front of a judge and he was charged with this crime and he is awaiting sentencing or something like that. And that show was very popular. It still is online, like old episodes of it. But also it had a lot of problems. Not everybody who was caught on camera was charged with the crime. And famously, one of the people who realized what was happening and that he was about to be on TV for this thing, he ended up doing something really horrible outside the house, and they did not air the segment because he was no longer around. So, like, this stuff can go very wrong, and there's an exploitative part of this, and maybe you think, who cares? Those guys are bad dudes. They should be caught, which makes sense too. But the point is, that was a TV show. And to an extent, they took precautions. Now, the reason I bring that up is because more recently on YouTube, there are people who are like, I want to go viral on YouTube. You know what I could do? I could pretend to be a 14-year-old child and I could try luring someone and I can have them meet me somewhere and I can bring my camera and I can videotape that whole thing, and they think this is going to get them clicks. And sometimes it does. And that is what Caleb Roberts just got caught doing. So here's what happened. There is a Christian version of those vigilante groups. It's called Operation 17-2, which is a reference to a Bible verse that says it would be better for them to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their neck than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. Which basically says, if you're a sinner, I'm going to come after you before you hurt a child. So this Christian vigilante group, they posed as a child. They ended up striking up a conversation with Caleb. And long story short, Caleb said, I'm going to meet you, child, at a local Florida CVS store. And when he got to that CVS, who walks in there? It's not a little child. It is a guy named Garrett Gross, who is the former MMA fighter behind this sting operation. And Garrett had like the notes with him of their chats and the screenshots. And there was like a team with video cameras also there. This is a 15-minute video that is online where they go into the CVS. They find Caleb. They quickly walk outside the CVS and confront him about what they know and what he said. And Caleb tries to put on this routine where he's like, I was here to meet a guy friend of mine who presumably is his age. Then before long, he's confessing, no, I was totally here to assault a child. And along the way, he admits he's a virgin, which no one was asking. He admits he's a youth pastor, which, hold on to that one. We'll come back to that. And he says he's a really good guy who just sometimes gets these thoughts in my head. Yeesh, that's disturbing. And then at one point, he calls his dad, who is a pastor, on speakerphone. And I'm just going to play a very short clip of that.
Hey, Dad, how you doing? So, listen, I made a mistake.
That's all I wanted to show you. He calls his dad on speakerphone while the cameras are rolling. At this point, this guy is not thinking about, maybe I should just shut my mouth and like walk away or go to the police or whatever. He's like, let me do all of this in front of the camera. And by the end of the video, you see him getting into a cop car, though I will say, I don't even know if those are real cops or if that was cosplay or what. Now, that video has gone viral because, like, youth pastor caught in a sting like this. Of course, that's going to go viral. Let's talk about some of the ethical concerns here. Groups like this try to capture predators because they think it's the right thing to do or because they think it'll go viral, or maybe both. But they're often so obsessed with footage of the capture, they don't always do the procedural steps that will ultimately catch the predator, right? Like, I don't know if this group was working with the police when they did this. I don't know if they were working with people who knew what the rules are when it comes to communication about all this stuff, which means it's entirely possible that police investigate and get Caleb. They take him to court to charge him with the crime, but the evidence that's been collected, the chats, are inadmissible in court. And if that happens, well, technically this person has not committed any crime. He hasn't been charged with anything. but there's a viral video that has basically destroyed his life that is going to be out there for a long time. And I don't know what the ethics of that are, because again, I saw what the guy confessed to, and it was pretty horrible. But I'm just saying, if you haven't been charged with a crime, should you have that label of being a criminal? Right? That's why we say things are alleged. Also, groups like these are often accused of entrapment. You have steered someone to commit a crime they otherwise would not have committed because you lured him in. He wasn't going to ask this child to meet him, but you begged him to meet you. That is one of the reasons some cases like this are often thrown out. I don't know what their chats were like in this case, but also I don't trust that they know what they're doing enough to know how to avoid that. And of course, there's always the possibility that when you catch someone like this and you get them on camera and they know this is maybe being live streamed or something, they realize their life is already over. And so they take drastic action, whether it's violence against the people behind the camera or violence against themselves. And I don't know why that's any better. So all of this is disturbing. There are ethical concerns about all of these types of vigilante groups. I did reach out to that former MMA fighter to get his take on this. He did not respond back to me. But in any case, in this particular situation, two things happen really quickly. One is that local police did say they took over the investigation of this case. However, according to the MMA fighter, Garrett Gross, when the police went to court because they wanted a warrant to search Caleb's phone, guess what happened? The judge said no. And look at this Facebook post from Garrett. If you saw our most recent catch in Palatka, Florida, the judge there denied the department a warrant for his phone, saying that our evidence isn't credible because of AI advancements. We have reached the point where a grown man can show up on video, admit he came to meet a 14-year-old, and instead of action, we get AI might make this unreliable. And while I do get the frustration there, because it seems ridiculous to say, well, the screenshots you are providing me may have been artificially manipulated, and you're not giving me a reason to search that guy's phone, so I'm not giving you a warrant. This is why you don't do this stuff on your own. Because shit like this might happen and you don't know what the rules are. So that's one thing. So right now, here's where we're at. The police say the investigation is ongoing, but they have not charged Caleb with anything. So keep that in mind. That's the latest update I have on that. But the second thing is, shortly after that video went live, the church posted, where did it go? Right here. Come back screen. There we go. The church said that Pastor Steve and Angie Roberts are stepping down. After Caleb's video went viral, his dad, the pastor of the church, and his wife, they decided we can't be at this church anymore. Or better yet, the people at the church are like, the hell is going on in your family? And these people had to resign their positions from the church. I think Steve Roberts was only a pastor there for literally 1 year. So it's relatively new. I will say, in that church's message, nowhere in that message did it say if the church was investigating Caleb's interactions with kids in the church. They did not say where people could go if they had concerns about this family. They did not say if they would have a counselor available for the people at that church to talk to. They also didn't say anything about what the hell happened, which again, if all you saw was the church's message, you might come away thinking it was the pastor who did something wrong, when that's not really the case at all here. There was a local news story as soon as the Caleb video happened and as soon as the church posted the website, and I swear they said this in the news segment, is facing these allegations because they had no clue what the church was talking about. And that is the church's fault for being so vague to be totally useless. Anyway, the church's leadership page now has one line on it. It says, "We are currently praying and beginning the search for a new pastor." And before you are like feeling bad for the parents in the situation who just lost their church, they just lost their jobs, I do want to play you one sermon clip that I found from Steve, the dad, because he basically mocked the very idea of transgender people. And I just want you to know he's not necessarily a good guy here who got caught up in something awful his son did. Let me play you this clip from Steve.
If I remember in Genesis, God made a man, then God made woman, and then he stopped making people. But I looked up gender identities, and I said, how many do you think there are? I didn't Google, and one site said there's 57, the next one said 98, and the next one said 107 different identities, not just man and woman. So being a man is harder today in many ways, and
it's so hard being a man knowing that other humans exist. I don't know. Don't ask me to Christ explain that one to you. It doesn't make any sense. And he doesn't say this in that particular sermon, but like, I just want to remind you, plenty of conservative Christian pastors love to say our children need protection from LGBTQ people, especially trans people, drag queens, because, oh no, they might use a bathroom in the same space as you and your family. And yet it turns out in this particular case, his son may have been the most dangerous person in this community, right? Like, it raises a lot of questions about what these churches and parents are teaching kids about consent and sex education and purity, because Caleb in that full video made it sound like he's never done anything with anybody, and this felt to him like an opportunity to do something with someone else, presumably, who had no experience. Doesn't make any of it okay. I'm just saying, like, I want to know what this church is teaching, because they're complicit in some of this. If people are growing up thinking this is a normal thing you should do. Anyway, Caleb, as far as I know, is not gay. He's not trans. He's not a drag queen. But he, according to that 15-minute video, is an adult who wanted to meet a child. Anyway, I wish these churches would admit that they are not any better than any of these people they routinely condemn, and in many cases, they are worse. Okay, I'm going to stop there. What questions do we have about this story? Thanks for that donation. God also created day and night according to this chapter. Does he think dawn and dusk doesn't exist? I don't even know. I'm sorry, Olivia. What are we talking about? This video or the previous Dawkins one? I don't know anymore. I'm going to skip this question, but come back to me in a second. And could the people setting the bait get in trouble too? I don't know the answer to that. Like, the law on this was so weirdly murky. There was a New York Times article a couple years ago about these kinds of vigilante groups and all the problems that they are creating, even though they're trying to solve some problems. And again, you have a lot of murky gray areas. This is why you leave this sort of stuff to the professionals. And I think what these people would tell you is, well, the professionals aren't doing enough. Okay, but it doesn't mean you're suddenly an expert because you watched a couple of episodes online or you watched other guys do this and you think I could do that too. There are horrible ways these stories could end, even worse than what we already saw. That was about men and women and gender identity. Thank you for that clarification. Doesn't that count as entrapment? So, not a lawyer. I don't know what the legal definition is to say we've made you do something you would not normally have done versus you decided to meet us, the decoy. Like, I don't know where the line is drawn. Not my job to know where the line is drawn. But again, I would hope the people luring these predators do know what the rules are, and I don't trust that all of them do. And that's the issue. If only he had that radiant cell phone, then he would have. Would it have stopped? Like, I don't know where they had these chats. I don't know where Caleb met this child on the internet. So I actually don't know if the site where they met would have been one of the banned ones under that Christian phone network. But if it wasn't, then that's a strike against Radiant now, isn't it? Oh, if they are not cops, then it's not entrapment. Interesting to know. Well, there you go. And again, it's not a drag queen. Yep, correct. It's almost never a drag queen, right? Like, nope. Did anyone else see Trump gushing over that other MMA fighter at a UFC event? Yeah, Trump loves big, burly men who praise him. He's so excited about hosting an MMA match on the front of the White House. Anything to get people not to talk about gas prices or Epstein, right? All right, jumping to another story. Okay, we can go ahead and get on with this. So I have a weird update for you involving Norway and the Jehovah's Witnesses. Their Supreme Court in Norway just issued a decision that is troubling, and it's worth talking about how we got to this point. And let's talk about this. I made a video about this maybe a year ago, maybe more, but this is worth discussing. So, Norway does not have a national religion, but it is one of those countries where they literally use taxpayer dollars to fund religion. And like the more people you have in your faith, the more money the country gives you for what you do. And I think the thinking behind here is religious organizations provide a service to the people, to our citizens. And so if you're like the Catholic Church and you're doing this thing that people want to be a part of, it's meaningful to them, then we want to give you money to do the work you're doing since it matters to our citizens. That's the best version of this story. So their rules are if you are a religious group with at least 50 registered members, you can apply for these state subsidies. And apparently, like in 2022, the last year I could find numbers for this, 736 different groups got taxpayer funding for their religion, including like the Catholic Church. So the law is very open regarding what type of religion we could be talking about here. But there are some lines in the sand, and this is an English translation of what the rules are. Check this out. Grounds for refusing grants. If a religious or philosophical community, because humanists can get money too, or individuals acting on behalf of the community, uses violence or coercion, makes threats, violates children's rights, violates statutory prohibitions on discrimination, or otherwise seriously violates the rights and freedoms of others, then maybe we don't give you the money. Right? I mean, that makes some sense. I mean, we're not giving money to a religion that happens to promote violence. That makes sense. Okay, fine. And if you're hurting children, you should not get money. And I know there are atheists who might argue that any sort of religious indoctrination amounts to brainwashing, but these are limited to like provably awful, irrefutable things, not up for debate. Okay, with that out of the way. In those rules, though, they also say you cannot force people to remain members of your club. There has to be the freedom to join your religion and leave your religion, right? You can't ban interaction with non-members. If you're a member of our group, you're not allowed to talk to anybody else. That's a cult. And Norway says we're not giving money to cults here, which is fine too. They say you can't make children pledge a lifelong commitment to you. Children are not allowed to like sign away their souls at a young age. So like practicing faith, whatever the faith is fine. Cult-like behavior, not okay if you want a taxpayer subsidy. So with that in mind, here's what happened. In 2021, there were about 13,000 Jehovah's Witnesses in Norway. And that meant they were getting from the government about 1.8 million US dollars from the Norwegian government. Let me say that again. There were about 13,000 Jehovah's Witnesses. They were getting $1.8 million from the government, about $140 per member. That's how much they were getting in taxpayer subsidies. But there were some whistleblower complaints that, hey, the Jehovah's Witnesses are breaking your rules, Norway, so maybe you should look into this. And so they did look into it. And basically, a government officer wrote up a report where he said, there are two things that really concern me. Number one, the Jehovah's Witnesses have a practice called disfellowshipping, which is basically shunning. Meaning, if you are part of the religion, but you say you no longer believe in Jehovah, you want to leave the religion, you are going to be cut off from that entire community. Your family may never want to talk to you. The people in your Kingdom Hall church never want to talk. You're not allowed to talk to them ever again. You are cut off from that entire group. And the thinking there is maybe you'll get so lonely and depressed, you'll finally learn your lesson and come back. But the thing is, if you don't believe in this shit, you're not going to come back. And this is the sort of thing that has torn apart families. Because you can imagine someone, maybe an older person leaves the religion and they're cut off. But you, the son, let's say you're older, you're married now, you have a child. You want that child to meet the grandfather. Guess what? Not allowed, because grandfather was disfellowshipped. He's cut off. He's not allowed to have access to that kid. Like, that's the pernicious way these rules have been implemented. So disfellowshipping sounds like cult-like behavior, said this government official. The other thing was, this also applies to children, because if a child is breaking religious rules or says they don't want to be a part of the religion, they are also cut off from this network. Now, if they're a child, they may not be kicked out of the house, but they are effectively treated as pariahs. So if you're a young teenager who quits the religion, you are subject to this sort of exclusion too. So the argument here is the shunning seems very cult-like, and you are not allowing children to really have freedom of religion here. And those were the concerns. And the witnesses would say, yeah, those are what our rules are. So they're not denying any of this. Those are their rules. Their argument is, yeah, but we're a religion and we're allowed to have religious rules. If you don't like it, don't join us. That was their argument. But anyway, the government official said, because of these two problems, I don't think you should be receiving taxpayer dollars. And the government said, yeah, sounds like you're right. We're not going to give them dollars a year. So they said they were going to sue in court. And they did. And guess what? When the judge heard this case, the judge basically said, yeah, what the government official is right. You are breaking Norway's laws about these taxpayer subsidies, so you don't get the funding. It seems pretty crystal clear. And this was all happening in 2024. That's when the ruling came down. The district court in Oslo basically said the state did nothing wrong when they took away your taxpayer subsidies. And by the way, hey, witnesses, you got to pay the state their legal fees too. So that's interesting. They had to pay about $100,000 in legal fees. So that was interesting. And the witnesses at the time said, we're going to appeal this decision. And they did. And then guess what happened? In March of 2025, here is the headline from the Jehovah's Witnesses website. Court of Appeal unanimously overturns the unconstitutional that decision. The Jehovah's Witnesses are allowed to get their taxpayer funds again. So yeah, the earlier court decision. So they reversed everything. And that was deeply disappointing. The judges basically said that if you shun somebody, you're not actually violating their rights, and that removing disobedient is not disappointing decision, because we know how deeply troubling those practices are. Now, to their credit now, Norway's government said, screw that. We're going to appeal that decision to the Supreme Court. And they did. Let me repeat that. The government of Norway said, We see what the Jehovah's Witnesses are doing to members and kids. We are not going to let this decision stand. We're appealing this to the Supreme Court. And that is the decision that just came down last week. And guess what Norway's 5-member Supreme Court said? It was a 3-2 decision, and they said we're going to uphold what the appellate court said, which is to say the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And that is very, very frustrating. So here's where we're at right now. Jehovah's Witnesses get to have their state subsidies again. They were also, when they were kicked out of the program, they were also not allowed to perform legal marriages. Now they'll be able to do that again too. And that also means the shunning is going to continue forever, because the government said there's nothing wrong with it. It's not our problem. That's a religious thing they have. I want to show you what the majority wrote. This is a disturbing thing that the majority said in their ruling. Look at number 138. This is an English translation of the ruling. I find that the Jehovah's Witnesses' practice of disfellowshipping does not constitute undue pressure that violates members' rights under Article 9 of the European Human Rights Constitution to withdraw from the religious community. We're not hurting their constitutional rights. Disfellowshipping does not apply to family members living in the same household, and family ties are not severed. They kind of are, though. Maybe not if you're a kid and you're still under your parents' roof, but later on, if you're an adult, they can kick you out of the house. They do kick you out of the house. Maybe not in the rule book, but in practice, that's what happens. Although the practice entails indirect pressure against leaving, members are not subjected to direct pressure, such as threats of sanctions in connection with leaving. Furthermore, the shunning practice is rooted in the doctrine itself, which is known to those who join Jehovah's Witnesses. In other words, if you become a Jehovah's Witness, you need to know what you're signing up for. You're agreeing to a contract you have read. So if you don't like the practice, that's on you. Except it's not, because if you're a child born into one of these families, you don't have a say in what the rules are. You are signing up for the contract before you know how to read. So that's a weird thing to say. And what are you talking about? There's no direct pressure. They are going to cut you off from everybody. I know we've talked about this as atheists, but if you leave, let's just say your non-denominational white evangelical church, which does not have this practice, a lot of the reason that a lot of people who don't believe in God anymore do not leave their church is because they would be losing their friend group, a social safety net, people who look after their kids, people who are there for them if they are sick or if they lose their job. They love those people. They love that community. But if they don't believe in God anymore, what do they do? Do they walk away from the church? They're like, I can't. Everything I've ever known is in that church. I can't leave it. But with Jehovah's Witnesses, in the rules, it says if you stop believing in this stuff, you are cut off from all of that. How is that not direct pressure to stay in the organization? You can't pretend people can enter and leave freely when that's what the rules are. That seems very messed up to me. I don't know. For people who grow up in the religion and don't consciously make a choice of joining it, you really do begin to believe you are trapped with no opportunity to break free. And there are people you can watch on YouTube right now who have really good channels who are former Jehovah's Witnesses who can tell you what it's like to be on the receiving end of being disfellowshipped. So even if there are no formal sanctions against you leaving, it doesn't make the shunning any less cruel. So the Supreme Court awarded the Jehovah's Witnesses about $230,000 US dollars in legal fees that the government now has to pay on top of whatever they were owed before. I don't know if the Jehovah's Witnesses are allowed to get these taxpayer subsidies. I am wondering what it takes for any group to not get them. What do you have to do to lose those subsidies at this point? I don't know. And before I finish the story, I just want to show you a couple quick things, because in Norway, they have had some very interesting situations develop when they allow people to leave religion freely. So, just really quick, in 2016, the nation's evangelical Lutheran Church launched a website that had to make it easier to track members. You could have like an online database of members. But a lot of people in 2016 decided to use that form because that was like the national religion at the time. They used that form to say, I want to unsubscribe from this religion. So I want you to delete my information from your database. And that led to this headline in 2016. Thousands leave Norwegian church as online registration backfires, which is beautiful. Just chef's kiss right there to that website thing. There was also a mini scandal in Norway in 2015 when the Catholic Church was fined by the Norwegian government. Check this out. Look at this headline. Norway sends Catholic Church a $5 million bill. And basically, Norway's government said the Catholic Church was like ginning up its membership numbers to get more taxpayer dollars. And they were fraudulently registering thousands of people who were not Catholic because of that taxpayer subsidy. And so the government fined the Catholic Church for lying to them. Beautiful. But like, this is the thing. When you allow people to enter and leave your religion freely, people in Norway have found that people leave those religions. And the Jehovah's Witnesses, not because of that, but like, they know that that's a possibility. So they make it really hard for people to leave. And now the Norwegian government is rewarding them for it, which I don't think they deserve. But it's very disturbing. So if Jehovah's Witnesses get those federal benefits again, they will. I mean, it's never too late to leave, though. If you're a Jehovah's Witness who is mentally out, there is a way out. There are plenty of people who have done it. It's hard, but like, you can do it. Okay, I will stop there. What questions we got about this story? I deflated when I heard the Norwegian government did not hold Jehovah's Witnesses accountable. At first they did, and it sounded like a dream. Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, when I was looking at like the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses subreddit, when that first decision came down, I mean, it was a celebration. Even though it's Norway, not a huge country per se, that is a big deal to see a religion face any sort of consequences for this harm they have caused. And the subsequent decisions in favor of the Jehovah's Witnesses, I think a lot of people were like frustrated, but that was kind of expected. They're like, of course, the big religion's going to win. They have a lot of money. They have a lot of lawyers. So they're like disappointed, but also like, yeah, we figured that would happen. Family ties are not severed. They literally are, though. I know. Of course, the family ties are severed. And by the way, you can ask anyone who is like in a bad relationship. You might live with someone, technically speaking. It doesn't mean that you two are close. So like the idea that your marriage is still intact because you two live together. No, it's not necessarily. And for Jehovah's Witnesses or for the judges to say, oh, well, if they shun you, you're still living in the same household. So your family ties are not severed. Dude, they are. They're just waiting for the right time to let you loose so you don't die. Can this escalate to the EU Human Rights Council? Ooh, I do not know the answer to that. I would be shocked if it could. Especially because this feels like just a judgment call as opposed to a actual physical like violation. And it would be very weird for even the Human Rights Council of any kind to say, well, this religion's beliefs are so extreme that what? We're going to say they don't get the taxpayer subsidies? Because if you go down that line, a lot of religions would be under the spotlight. I don't know that that's something any Human Rights Council would want to do. Seems like a slippery slope. But I don't know what the rules are. Wonder which is worse, leaving Jehovah's Witnesses or leaving Scientology. There is a lot of overlap from what I have heard, but neither is easy. I mean, anyone who's even left Protestant Christianity knows it's hard, and it's super hard when they do their best to keep it a really insulated community, and they make you feel like you can't leave. And that's something both of those have in common. There was some freezing, but it stopped. Ooh, I hope the internet is working now. Thanks, Dan. All right, I'm jumping to another story. Okay. Just checking this. Okay. I need to give you an update on a story I must have covered like a year or two ago, but it's a wild story and I wanted to share it with you because it involves the former mayor of Spokane, Washington. She is suing her city for just the weirdest reason. And I feel like it's important to go down this rabbit hole for just a bit because this has been going on for like 3 years now. So imagine this, it is August of 2023. And do you remember Sean Foyt? He is the Christian nationalist musician who, in 2020, when we're all indoors wearing masks, he is going around the country playing open air concerts where everyone is encouraged, don't wear masks, come to this area, stand real close to each other and sing along with me with your spit. Like, he was a COVID super spreader, basically. And ever since then, when he realized that was a way to make a lot of money that way, he has been a right-wing conspiracy theorist ever since. So that's Sean Foyt. Well, in 2023, Sean Foyt held a worship event in the state of Washington. And Sean Foyt is the guy with the hair on the left of your screen there. The other guy who is next to Sean Foyt is, at the time, he was a state lawmaker named Matt Shea, S-H-E-A. And Matt Shea is even more disturbing. By the way, during that worship service, they said things like, "We've got an enemy we need to fight. His name is Satan." Sean Foyt said, "I've had the privilege to pray over many mayors and many governors and even the president, but not every city in the world has a prophetic history like Spokane." So Sean Foyt and Matt Shea, they've been working together for several years. Sean Foyt accepted an award from Matt Shea. Those two guys are buddy-buddy. But let's talk about Matt Shea for a second, because you may have forgotten this, but in 2018, he made a lot of headlines because the Spokesman Review newspaper published a 4-page document written by Matt Shea in which he discussed the biblical basis for war. And in that document, he said that there was a penalty for men who break biblical law. And look at what it says right down here. If they do not yield to, like, the Christians, kill all males. This guy was like, my rules of war are we're going to kill every man unless he agrees to, like, stop all abortion, no same-sex marriage, must obey biblical law, no communists, etc. So, well, that's disturbing, right? And Shea was like, you guys are taking that out of context. It's ridiculous. But after that document was made public, he lost his role as the chair of the state's Republican caucus. And then the following year, there was an article in The Guardian about how he was part of a chat room with a bunch of other dudes where they talked about violently attacking their political enemies. And it's like, yeah, this is kind of your war document now, isn't it? Sounds like it was real. And then he was found in 2019 to be part of a group. Look at this headline from the Seattle Times. Washington Representative Matt Shea engaged in domestic terrorism against the U.S., says State House report. The State House investigated this guy and called him a domestic terrorist. So there's that. Oh, and by the way, he also has said he wants to create a 51st state. Not Washington, D.C., not Puerto Rico. No, he wants the eastern part of Washington and the western part of Idaho to create a 51st state called Liberty. And it would be run by, I assume, his biblical rules. And also, a couple of years ago, the Satanic Temple was protesting outside the state capitol over a policy thing. And Matt Shea decided to show up and like sprinkle oil all over the grounds of the Capitol. But by doing so, he literally wrecked the like historic material that building was made out of. And so the state fined him like $4,700. So Matt Shea, not a good guy, a fan of white Christian nationalists, a domestic terrorist. And Republicans were like, my dude, you need to resign. And he refused to resign. But in mid-2020, he decided, I'm not going to run for re-election. So you would think that's the end of Matt Shea. He did not want to lose in a primary, maybe. So he just decided to quit before they could vote him out. Anyway, that was Matt Shea. And in 2023, Sean Feucht comes to Spokane. And guess who is on stage with Sean Feucht? It is Matt Shea once again. And it's like, what is this dude doing back here? We thought we were rid of him for good. And this is where it gets interesting, because guess who this lady is? Who is now praying on stage with Sean Feucht with Matt Shea, his arm on her shoulder. That would be the mayor of Spokane. Her name is Nadine Woodward. So she went up on stage with the domestic terrorist, Matt Shea. And so, real quickly, when video of this event came out and people saw what was going on, they were furious. How on earth could our mayor be on stage with those guys? Like, Sean Feucht is a problem in and of itself, but Matt Shea is a politician. You know who he is. You know what's wrong with him. And you're cool with being on stage with that guy? So really quickly in 2023, she issued a statement, but this is the statement. She said, well, you guys, we were having our prayer rally because there was a wildfire in our area, and we were just thinking about the first responders and things like that. I wasn't thinking about who's on stage. So she puts out this statement about the wildfires. I spent 8 hours witnessing firsthand the depths of wildfire devastation. Okay, who cares? If you scroll down, look at what she said here. I am deeply disturbed that Matt Shea chose to politicize a gathering of thousands of citizens who joined together yesterday to pray for fire victims and first responders. I attended the event with one purpose only, and that was to join with fellow citizens to begin the healing process. I am also disappointed that Lisa Brown, who was running against her in her re-election bid, has chosen to distract from our community's primary purpose at this moment, and that is to do all we can to embrace the victims and help them in their time of need. Stop asking me about the domestic terrorists that I am buddies with, right? So, first of all, if there were wildfires, you know what's not helping the first responders? Your stupid prayers. But whatever. She's like, you guys, this is not about Matt Shea. And then everyone was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean Matt Shea chose to politicize this gathering? This was a politicized gathering. It was a celebration of Christian nationalism, and the mayor joined in. How do you go to any event with those two guys and then act surprised when the leopards start eating your face. So, after people complained about her stupid statement, she sent out a second press release hours later. This is from a local news site. Woodward's campaign sent a second press release expressing her regret. I did not seek, nor do I accept any support from Matt Shea. I am opposed to his political views as they are a threat to our democracy, and I regret my public appearance with him. I was invited to share in prayer with several thousand citizens out of a heartfelt concern for fire victims, first responders, blah, blah, blah. I was not aware that he would be at the event last night, and it only became apparent as I was walking on stage that he would be leading the prayer. I should have made better efforts to learn who would be speaking at the event. Got that, everybody? She's too stupid to look at who's going to be at the rallies she goes to. The funniest thing about that statement, besides the fact that, okay, let's say you really didn't know who was going to be on stage. When you're walking up on stage and you see a domestic terrorist, wouldn't your next step be to just turn around and not be on stage? Like, I'm not a politician, but that strikes me as politics 101. If like a horrible person who's in the news for being horrible shows up at one of your events, you don't do the photo op with the guy. But the funniest thing about that is, you know who chimed in on that message? A guy named Matt Shea, who told news outlets she totally knew I would be there. This is an annual event planned months ago to worship Jesus. It wasn't for fire victims. She was invited and she accepted before the fire started on Friday. However, we of course wanted to pray last night for all those who have lost everything and be there for them and also pray for our leaders. Blah, 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 blah. She is the one that politicized what everyone knows what was a worship event. We're praying for Nadine. Oh my God, the domestic terrorist is throwing the mayor under the bus. It's beautiful. It is beautiful. By the way, even if Woodward saw Matt Shea and she's like, I should have walked away, but I didn't know he was going to be there, that implies she was totally fine with Sean Foyt being on stage. He's also bad. Why would you be okay with that? That's a different question. Anyway, hilarious that Matt Shea is the one who called her out on all this. So, Woodward apparently was lying about her participation, and that was a problem because she was running for re-election. So, one of the things that happened as a result of that, we're now in like September of 2023, is the other city council members, who some of them were up for re-election too, they were like, she doesn't speak for us. Look at what one of the city council members said to a local paper. Ben Stuckert, the former city council president who ran against Woodward for mayor in 2019, he was quoted as saying, "You don't go to white Christian nationalist events put on by Christian nationalists and not expect the Christian nationalists to be there." What an amazing statement right there. Love that. I will say her opponent in the mayoral race, Lisa Brown, did not say she needed to resign, but she also condemned Woodward. And she basically, Lisa Brown said Woodward should be disavowing Matt Shea, an anti-woman, anti-LGBTQ extremist associated with political violence, which is true. Like, if you don't have the courage to denounce Christian nationalism and two of the harmful leading proponents of it, why the hell would you be trusted to run a big city? The best case situation is that she just cared about prayer more than she cared about who she was praying with. But again, why are you praying in the event of a wildfire? Go do something useful, right? A better leader would have left the God talk to everybody else while she took action, and she failed at that. So anyway, I swear I have a point with this story. The city council was still genuinely mad at her actions. So at their next city council meeting, they issued a formal resolution. And this is a 4-page resolution. But look at the top here. This is a resolution formally denouncing Mayor Nadine Woodward for her actions that associated her with former Washington State Representative and alleged domestic terrorist Matt Shea and known anti-LGBTQ extremist Sean Foyt. And after they explain why these guys are a problem, And this goes on for several pages. They finally get to like the therefore clause of this. Let me scroll down to this. Now, therefore, be it resolved. The Spokane City Council formally denounces Mayor Nadine Woodward for her actions that associated her with an alleged domestic terrorist, former Representative Matt Shea, blah, 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 and Sean Foyt. So it's a symbolic resolution to say we're denouncing what the mayor did. When you go to the voting booth, we are not with her. So that's what they did. It's a symbolic move. I get what they did. And guess what happened in that election that year? Woodward lost to Lisa Brown. Lisa Brown became the new mayor, and Woodward wasn't mayor anymore. And Lisa Brown is still the mayor today. So it's worked out. And what's Woodward doing these days? I think she's a realtor. She's selling real estate. Nothing wrong with that, but she's not in politics anymore. But in 2024, she decided to file a complaint, a predecessor to a lawsuit against the entire damn city. Even it had been it had been like a year since she lost the race, and she filed this complaint against the city saying that that resolution violated her free speech rights. And look at this from a local paper. A 4-member majority of the Spokane City Council, in violation of the state and federal constitution, condemned speech by Woodward, which speech is protected by the state and federal constitutions. The city council did so, they issued their resolution, with the intent of interfering with the then upcoming mayoral election and promoting the candidacy of Woodward's opponent. The council's violation of speech and association rights and election interference. According to the document, Woodward is prepared to settle with the city for $1.4 million. So she wanted $1.4 million because that resolution hurt her fifis. And she's like, they were mean to me. They violated my free speech. And I know you already know this. But no, they didn't. No, they didn't violate her free speech. You know how I know that? Because she spoke. She went to the damn rally. She was on stage. She did the thing she wanted to do. What she doesn't like is that everyone saw it and they were like, look at what you did. We're criticizing you for that. They're criticizing her for her actions, not for the speech, but for she's mad that there were consequences for her speech. She doesn't like that. Apparently she thinks she's mayor. She is a Christian. She's a Christian woman. Therefore, you're not allowed to say anything about her. So she files that claim. Guess what the city does in response to it? They look at it and they're like, ha, and then they do nothing. They don't respond to the claim. So I bring all this up because this all happened, like this complaint was mid-2024, but like last week, there was an update to this story, which I thought ended because she never filed a lawsuit after that. So like, seems like you're not getting your money, and it seems like you should just go be a realtor now. But last week, she issued, I want to show you the headline. This is the update from last week. Former Spokane Mayor Woodward wants $10 million from the city. Alleges First Amendment violations. She got herself a lawyer. She wants to sue the city, so she filed an updated complaint. And look at this. Woodward says the city and council members violated her constitutional rights with that resolution, and that her actions irreparably damaged and continues to damage Woodward in her professional and personal reputation. The claim says the city's action resulted in harassment by the media, estrangement from her social group, supporters, and neighbors, and loss of business and professional opportunities. You guys, no one wants to be Nadine's friend because they all realize she is batshit crazy. She went to the white Christian nationalist rally along with the domestic terrorist, and everyone was like, hey, you know that realtor trying to sell you a house? Here's a picture of her with with two very, very horrible people. It's just there. And it's been haunting her. And instead of doing the smart thing of, like, I don't know, building up her realtor business so that when people Google her, they find that, all she does is keeps talking about Sean Foyt and Matt Shea, which is just the Streisand effect all over again. She's just drawing attention to the thing she wants people not to talk about. It is kind of hilarious. So this amended claim wants $10 million from the city, and it never seems to have occurred to her that maybe no one wants to be her friend or colleague because we know what she does in her free time, and she's not a good person. If that's what you do in your free time, I don't need to hang out with you anymore. And I don't need to buy a house from you anymore. Like, anyone who willingly attends a Sean Foyt rally and anyone who receives prayers from a domestic terrorist, yeah, you're going to be criticized, and you should be criticized. And the resolution just was it put a city stamp on what people on the city council were already saying. And it just formally said, hey, look, the city of Spokane does not stand with what the mayor did, which seems sensible. A lot of cities put out resolutions for things. It's not a big deal. By the way, Sean Foyt sued the city of Spokane for like defamation or something for the same basic reasons. And a judge dismissed that case last year, saying there was no legal merit to it. And I think that's why Woodward has not filed a lawsuit yet, because it's going to be laughed out of court. So right now she's like, here's a complaint. Hey, city, you should like give me a bag of money to make up for what you did to me by like allowing that video of me at the prayer rally to be published. In the claim, which by the way, I had a chance to read, it's very long, it's very convoluted, but in that claim, Woodward says the city's actions imposed a scarlet letter on her, which took over the election cycle. To which I will just say, good for her for reading a banned book. That's very impressive. She knows the reference. She also says that the city council, because of what the city council did, Woodward continues to suffer ongoing injury, including vitriol, backlash, and threats, all of which has caused Woodward fear of physical harm. And look, that's awful. I don't want threats to go up against this woman. She should not be under any fear of physical harm, but she can and should be criticized for her stupid actions. If your response to a wildfire is to pray, we can say you are ignorant and useless. If you're hanging out with a domestic terrorist and you didn't walk away from him on first sight, we can criticize you for hanging out with the domestic terrorist. If you're hanging out with Sean Foyt and you didn't say a damn thing about him, we could say you're hanging out with a right-wing conspiracy theorist who put people's lives in danger during the last pandemic. If she didn't want to be associated with Christian extremists, then you should stop hanging out with Christian extremists, and you should denounce Christian extremism, and you should explain why their beliefs are awful. Tell me why his Christianity is bad. Tell me why you want nothing to do with it. Tell me that what he did during COVID is awful and abhorrent, and you would never stand for that. And tell me why Matt Shea is a bad guy. She didn't do any of that. She's like, how dare you call me out for appearing on stage with these people? Anyway, she wants millions of dollars because she never heard of the Streisand effect. That's like blaming your camera for an ugly selfie. It's not the camera's fault. I don't know. Her lawyer did not help situation either, because I want to show you one last thing from her lawyer here, because I am very curious why the lawyer is getting behind this argument. And the lawyer spoke to a local news outlet. Yeah, let me pull this up here. Here we go. Sorry, it's taking a second to load. But the lawyer for Woodward, oh my God, come back. I don't know, I'll figure it out. In any case, the lawyer said that neither federal nor state constitutions allow the legislature to punish the mayor for showing up and listening to whatever political or religious views are being discussed in our community. Legislative bodies simply cannot legislate speech. And that is exactly what the city council did. And that's her lawyer talking. And I'm just saying, they did not legislate her speech. They didn't. They didn't even punish her for the speech. And she did not merely show up to listen, right? She was there to participate in a Christian nationalist rally. She participated in an event run by extremists. The lawyer makes it sound like she was just randomly inside this building and a prayer circle broke out of nowhere. No, she knew what she was stepping into. So apparently even the lawyer doesn't seem to understand how free speech works. I don't know what to say about that. So, a draft lawsuit has been written up. The lawyer shared it with me, but it has not been filed yet, which is interesting. And I wonder if they're just trying to scare the city into giving Woodward $10 million, because if they file that lawsuit, I'm pretty sure it's going to be laughed out of court. Anyway, hilarious. We'll see how this goes. All right, I will stop there for now. What questions we got here? Killing the men, not the women. Dude needs to be reschooled on the patriarchy. No. I don't think he does, because Matt Shea, he doesn't want women to fight wars. That's the first thing. He only wants men to fight wars. But also, if you're like a beta male, there is nothing Christian nationalist alpha bros, theo bros, hate more than men who they perceive as weak. And so I'm not surprised that guys like him want to kill off the men who are not obeying their rules and not say anything about the women. I'm deeply disturbed that they defunded public services so that they could pray about disasters. Yeah, I don't even remember which public services they defunded. But again, let's have a conversation about the mayor's decisions and let's criticize them if they are bad, or the city councils if they are bad. Needless to say, the prayers are not helping. Give those first responders the equipment and resources they need. It seems like their fallback is always bastardizing the First Amendment. Freedom of speech is not the same as freedom of consequence, freedom from consequence. And that's true. People on the right hate it when you call them out for anything. They say they like free speech, but they'll go after people protesting the genocide in Gaza. They will go after Jim Comey for taking a picture of seashells because they don't know how words work. You know what I mean? Like all the people who are the loudest to complain about how much they stand for freedom of speech and they love open debate, they fall apart the second someone says something critical of them or says something they don't have a quick response to. Hypocrites. I like what you wrote in your last newsletter. Praise Jesus loud enough and you can get away with anything. It's so true, at least among the Christian right. And that's, I think, the point I was trying to make, which is people on like Southern Baptists, the MAGA cultists who love Jesus, they will let their own side get away with anything as long as they are pious enough publicly, right? Doesn't matter what the hypocrisy is, what the scandals are, what the gas prices are. That's why Donald Trump, for the 250th anniversary of the country, what are they doing? Are they having a celebration of the country? No, they are having basically a white Christian nationalist rally. Emphasis on the Christian. Why? Because if he can get the conservative Christians on his side, he knows they won't ever call him out on anything he's doing because they're gullible and they don't care and they are hypocrites and they don't actually have any principles. All right, I'm jumping to one last story here and then we'll be done. All right. I did a story earlier about a prominent former Southern Baptist leader who should be condemned. But now I want to talk about the Southern Baptist Convention as a whole because they just released a stunning new report. They do this every year. One of the things about the Southern Baptists is that it's not the Catholic Church, it's not hierarchical, but the organizing committee of the Southern Baptists, they do keep tabs on all their member churches. And one of the things churches can submit is like membership numbers. How much money are you taking in? How many baptisms have you done? And every year, the Southern Baptist Convention releases that information to the public. So we can tell how well they're doing or how well they are not doing. And this was the headline that just came out. Southern Baptists see attendance and baptism gains amid membership declines. And oh, those last two words are music to my ears. Let's talk about membership declines. Because they put out all this information, and I want to highlight this one chart that you just saw a glimpse of. Check this baby out right here. Let's talk about this for a second. This is their nationwide membership, as far as they can tell, because not every church submits membership numbers, but generally the same ones do every year. So you still get an inkling of what's happening here. And what we learn from this particular chart is that over the last year, the Southern Baptists lost over 390,000 members. This number right over here, that is a 50-year low. And that number, as you could tell from the shape of the chart, has been going down for 19 straight years. Unbelievable. That's amazing. And what did the Southern Baptists say? We have more baptisms, because they really don't want to focus on this curvature. And given the record declines in previous years, like things are getting worse for them. So this is what they actually said in their report. This is from Lifeway, which is like their research arm. Southern Baptist churches saw sustained growth in attendance and baptisms, but the 2-decade membership decline continued in 2025. Total Southern Baptist Convention membership fell by more than 3% from 2024 to 2025, dipping to 12.3 million. I know, it's still a lot, but they are now down to 12.3 million. While fewer members belong to Southern Baptist congregations, more are now attending worship services and small groups and are being baptized. Really leaning in on the whole baptism thing, which that's a made-up thing. Who the hell cares about that? So, it's never good when you have to brag about like, sure, we're not as popular as we used to be, you guys, but at least we dunk more people in water. Couldn't have happened to a more worthy organization. Just to give you some numbers here that are interesting. In 2003, Southern Baptists had a record high membership. It was 16.3 million Americans, making them like the largest Protestant denomination in the country. Now they are down, like I said, to 12.3. They have lost 4 million people over the past 2 decades. The last time the Southern Baptist Convention saw membership at this level, like I said, it's a 50-year low. Last time they saw 12.3 million members, it was 1973, when members were already, when Jimmy Carter had yet to be elected president, right? And yes, the number of baptisms has gone up. Yes, the in-person attendance numbers have gone up, but it doesn't counteract the fact that fewer and fewer Americans want to be Southern Baptist. Like, it doesn't matter how many people get baptized if the cup is still leaking faster than they can refill it. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. They also issued another chart here. It's the same one I showed you earlier, but it has more numbers. So the blue line at the top is their membership. And this one, it flattens out the membership so you can't see the drop as much. But there's the membership decline. But underneath, they have worship attendance. I'll remove myself here. You could see the second line. It's going up over the past like 5 years. And they're saying that 4.46 million people attend church on a regular basis. And that's gone up over the past few years. And I think that one makes sense, right? Especially after COVID, or at least after 2020, people were desperate for community. They are coming back to church. They just want to hang out with other humans again. So I kind of get why people would go back to church. But it's interesting that only like 4.4 million people, 4.5 million people are attending church, even though 12.3 million count themselves as members. Like that means what? 8 million people are just not attending church anymore, even though if they call themselves Southern Baptists and they are part of these churches. Interesting. What about the baptism numbers? That's the lowest one on the list. They say, I'm sorry, this is small group attendance. Small group attendance has also gone up. It's at 2.65 million. That's gone up for a few years. Fine. I'm not surprised that church members want to attend church things, but also who the hell cares? So what's going on here? Some of this can be blamed on just old people are dying and Southern Baptists are not finding enough young people to make up for the loss. I think that's part of it. But also, I want to show you something from 2023, which I find really, really interesting. Let me show this to you here. In 2023, the Southern Baptists were still dropping in membership numbers. And there's an article from Christianity Today 3 years ago when they released the same information. And I want to show you what the Southern Baptist head of this group was saying at the time. Let me see if I could find it here. Oh, here we go. Look at this from Christianity Today. This year's annual report released by Lifeway Research, look at Scott McConnell, executive director of the SBC's research arm. Much of the downward movement we are seeing in membership reflects people who stopped participating in an individual congregation years ago, and the record keeping is finally catching up. Membership totals for a congregation immediately reflect additions as well as subtractions, ... But many congregations are slow to remove others who no longer are participating. So this guy, the executive director of their research arm, is saying, you know why the numbers are falling so sharply? It's because we're just cleaning up our membership rolls. So you saw a drop, but that's because we were just erasing people who were never part of our congregations at all. It's record keeping, which is a thing you say when you know next year it's going to go up. But that's not what happened, is it? The membership numbers kept going down, right? So guess what Scott McConnell is saying today? Guess what he is saying now that these new numbers are out? Check this out. This is from this week. Church closures and churches cleaning up their membership rolls to reflect those people God has currently entrusted to them have negative impacts on total membership numbers. He's still saying 3 years later, it's going down because they're just cleaning up their membership records. That's why. Like, my dude, it does not take several years to have the computer delete the people who don't come to church anymore. You could do that in one sitting. So this guy's using the same excuse. I find that hilarious. So why else are people leaving the Southern Baptists? Well, nowhere in their press release do they mention that people might be turned off by the SBC's really awful response to sex abuse in the denomination. They don't mention sexual misconduct among former leaders. They don't mention how the SBC has punished churches for having women pastors. They've pushed out black pastors if they're not conservative enough. They've lost a lot of prominent advocates because they kicked out outspoken women as well. Remember Rick Warren, that famous pastor? They kicked out his church because he had a couple women who were pastors on his roll. Also, they're famously anti-gay, anti-LGBTQ, right? They didn't mention any of that as potential reasons people might not want to be associated with this church. It also doesn't say how some of the most influential SBC churches in the country have chosen to leave the denomination entirely. When the SBC was going to kick Rick Warren's church, Saddleback, out of the denomination, Saddleback up and left. They said, fine, you need us more than we need you, so we're out. And that was true of several, like at least 3 massive mega churches that used to be Southern Baptist. Those churches left because they believe women can hold certain positions of leadership in the church, even if not the top of the pyramid. But the SBC was like, that doesn't matter. Also, their public outreach is awful. Do you remember a few years ago, the president of the Southern Baptist Convention was a guy named Bart Barber, and he did an interview on 60 Minutes shortly after all the sex abuse stuff came to light to try to put a happy face on this denomination. And he did okay, according to critics. Like, he came off looking okay. However, in that interview with 60 Minutes, which you can find on YouTube, he still said, yeah, he would totally force children to have their rapists' babies because he's anti-abortion. He still said fetuses matter more than mothers. He promoted conversion therapy. He said someone in a same-sex marriage could not possibly be a good Christian. He denied the existence of trans people. He said he voted for Donald Trump in 2020. That's the best they could do when they were in front of the cameras. So yeah, why would you want to be a part of that denomination if that's your good guy? And I'm not saying the membership decline is because of Bart Barber or even his successor, Clint Presley, but like when the guy who is explaining how his religion of love teaches people that Jesus is homophobic, that God wants to further traumatize child victims of sexual assault, that he voted for the thrice married racist. Like, why would anyone want to support that religion? Right? And as Donald Trump continues to get less popular, and that's happening nonstop everywhere, in every demographic, it seems, I personally would think that all the religions that are forming strong ties to him, conservative Catholics, Southern Baptists, white evangelicals, I think people are also going to leave those religions as well, because how can you claim your religion is on the ethical and moral side of things if this is the guy you're backing? And I don't think we'll see those numbers play out for a couple of years, but I do think that's what's going to happen. Now, I do want to show you one last thing here, which is in the actual report that they released here. This is it. It's a one-page report. Look at the very bottom here, because this is the thing that is astonishing. How much money did all the churches in the SBC make? In 2024, they made $9.6 billion. And what did they make last year? It's still $9.6 billion, but it is a little more than the previous year. So the SBC is almost a $10 billion religious denomination. It's a money-making enterprise, and they are doing just fine. They will survive even if their membership is dropping. It's amazing. They've lost members from that year to that year, but they've gained more money after all those years, despite that. In case you're wondering, about 4.4% of Americans are Southern Baptists, but that does make them the largest Protestant denomination in the country. I don't know. I don't think Southern Baptists are going to become more popular in the future. So you can have all the baptisms you want. I'm sure that means something to people in the fold, but it means jack shit to those of us out of it, because I don't care what rituals you do. What I'm seeing is people are not wanting the Southern Baptist label. That's why membership is dying. And by the way, a lot of your members are much older. The demographics are not on your side here. And I also hope people start to realize how damaging their beliefs are and their political views are. And I hope that makes them walk away too. I don't think they're all going to ditch the idea of God altogether, but I hope they're realizing their lives are perfectly fine, even if they're not supporting churches that do more harm than good. All right. I will stop there. What questions we got here? I'm so proud to have contributed to that drop in membership. My wife, too. Hey, congratulations. Well done. They'll be baptizing the deceased next. Going over their graves, sprinkling some water on them, finding the Jew next door. Like, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they resorted to tactics to try to punch up their numbers here. They haven't done it yet, though. But that is kind of what the Mormon church was accused of doing to Jewish people, right? The other 8 million probably only attend on Christmas and Easter. That happens with a lot of churches. I do think you are right. Thank you for pointing that out. It's not that those 8 million, the gap between members and people who attend church, that gap isn't just people who don't go to church. It's people who don't go to church regularly. And I'm not surprised that that number is much, much higher. I remember you bringing this up a while back and thinking he was full of it. You mean me or the guy talking about this stuff in the guy talking about blaming voter rolls and cleaning up that? I don't know who you're talking about. I could be full of it. I don't know. Have you covered the people doing the speed runs through the Scientology buildings here in California? It's fantastic. No, I haven't covered it. I have seen some of the TikTok videos. I don't know how I don't know if I like that. I don't like it when people go into other places of worship, even if it's like the Scientology Center in LA, for whatever reason they have. Now you are interrupting their religious place of business. You know what I mean? And also, I feel like there are consequences for doing that. I mean, for the same reason you cannot break into a church. And like, I know we saw that in Minneapolis too, right? People protested at a church service, and there were questions over whether they should be held criminally. There should be criminal charges against that. But in this case, where you are just running into the Scientology building to do a speed run so you can get it on camera, I mean, what are you accomplishing? You're annoying the people in the building. You're getting police involved. I don't know what that's supposed to accomplish. I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, even Leah Remini, the actress who has been outspoken against Scientology, even she said she was not a fan of this. So I'm sure the videos are amusing. I am not a fan of doing that. There are plenty of things to criticize Scientology about. And right now, a lot of those runs seem like you're almost making me feel bad about for the Scientologists. And I don't think that's what you're hoping to accomplish. All right. That's it for tonight. Thank you so much. If you've watched any of this, thank you to Den for helping out and making this so much easier. You can support the channel, patreon.com/Hemant. And if nothing else, go to friendlyatheist.com and subscribe. I should be back next week at the same time. Hopefully you will join me then. Otherwise, good night for now. Thanks, everybody.